Possible new lead in the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
Oh, hopefully this is going to find her. I don't know. Dan Bowens, what do you know? Could it help crack the case?
Well, we hope so, Rosanna and Jerry. There's been no shortage of tips, tens of thousands, in fact, but investigators say meaningful leads, yeah, they've been hard to come by, even after the family offered that $1 million reward earlier this week. Now, there is a new video that could provide a fresh clue. Let's take a look. The images here, obtained by Fox Digital. A Ring doorbell camera about 2 miles from Guthrie's Arizona home captured several cars that were passing through the area that same night. The same night that she disappeared. Investigators say at least 12 vehicles drove by between midnight and 6 a.m. on February 1st. With some seen around 2:30 a.m., right around the time the 84-year-old's pacemaker last synced with her phone. Now, the Pima County Sheriff's Department says it is aware of the video and is taking steps to review it. Unclear if they knew about it before or if it's something they're just now seeing. Maybe they can slow down those images, possibly to get any kind of details from those vehicles as they drive by. Will it lead to something? We'll find out. Well, with the lack of physical evidence, many experts believe investigators will also now be focusing.
Meanwhile, a heavy silence hangs over the family's inner circle. Tomaso Chioni has not uttered a single public word since the night his mother-in-law disappeared. There has been zero engagement from him, no televised interviews, no written press statements, no social media appeals, and no public pleas for her return. On day 5, his wife Annie stood shoulder to shoulder with her siblings, Savannah and Cameron Guthrie, begging the abductors for mercy. Annie was front and center. Tomaso was notably absent. Savannah has been relentless, posting emotional tributes and desperate pleas daily, backing them with a 7-figure reward. Her brother Cameron immediately flew in from out of state to join the ground search. The community response has been overwhelming, with local church groups organizing grid searches and complete strangers driving in from neighboring states to assist. Yet Tomaso Chioni, the last verified person to see Nancy Guthrie alive, remains silent. This behavior has led veteran journalist Ashleigh Banfield to publicly identify him as the prime suspect. Sheriff Chris Nanos is well aware of these allegations, yet he has publicly pushed back, refusing to label Chioni as a suspect, despite the intense media speculation.
Are you actively investigating the son-in-law in this case? I know there were reports earlier this week and you refuted that. You said you haven't eliminated everybody. Have you eliminated him or come close to it, or are you actively looking at him?
We're actively looking at everybody we come across in this case. Everybody. We would be irresponsible if we didn't talk to everybody. The Uber driver, the gardener, the pool person, whoever. Everybody is so cliche, but everybody's still a suspect in our eyes. That's just how we look at things and think as cops. Does that mean we have a prime suspect? No, and the family's been very cooperative. They've done everything we've asked of them, and we want that relationship to continue. And sometimes people can be mean out there, and that can really harm us and harm our efforts.
Despite the sheriff's comments, Ashleigh Banfield has refused to retract her reporting. The Guthrie family has threatened legal action, yet she stands firmly by her sources. Banfield doubled down on her podcast, stating, "Here is what the mainstream media is missing." On day 3 of the investigation, a high-level source confirmed to me that authorities had impounded the vehicle belonging to the sister and brother-in-law. My source also revealed that the Nest security cameras at the home had been smashed. Furthermore, the back door was found ajar. There were signs of forced entry, and investigators discovered blood evidence inside the residence. Based on that initial scene, the brother-in-law was identified as the prime suspect. That was the status on day 3. Why was the focus so intense at that early stage? Experts suggest this is typical of complex investigations, which often ebb and flow as new evidence either corroborates or contradicts the initial theory. It is entirely possible for law enforcement to zero in on a target early on, only to pivot as the forensic picture becomes clearer. As we have seen in countless cases, detectives must remain fluid, willing to change their hypothesis based on where the physical evidence leads them. However, the dramatic findings on day 1 and day 2 may have created a classic case of confirmation bias among the initial responding officers. We will analyze that psychological factor shortly, but first, the DNA pending results. The entire investigation is holding its breath for the analysis of a glove found 2 miles from the scene. This glove bears a striking resemblance to the one worn by the intruder in the ring footage. Does the DNA match? Does it correlate with the blood found inside Nancy's home? Or is it simply a discarded item unrelated to the crime? We need to understand why the lab results are delayed, and whether that delay indicates a complex, mixed DNA profile. On February 4th, 2026, veteran anchor Ashleigh Banfield spoke directly into the microphone on her podcast, Drop Dead, serious asterisk, stating unequivocally, "My law enforcement source tells me that Tomaso Chioni is the prime suspect in this investigation." It is important to note that Banfield is not an amateur internet sleuth. She is a seasoned journalist who reported live from Ground Zero on 9/11 for MSNBC. She anchored primetime on CNN and hosted a nightly program on News Nation for 5 years before launching her independent venture in January 2025. Her report cited a trusted source within the department who claimed that Nancy Guthrie's vehicle had been seized and towed for forensic processing. The source alleged a specific forensic link between that vehicle and Annie's husband, Tomaso Chioni. She characterized her source as deeply embedded in the investigation, an individual with unassailable access and credentials. Yet, later in the same broadcast, she tempered that assertion. She clarified, "I need to calibrate this." When investigators identify a prime suspect early on, it often just means they are the initial focus, not necessarily the only possibility. To illustrate the danger of premature certainty, she invoked the case of Ed Smart, Elizabeth Smart's father, who was aggressively and wrongly targeted by authorities before his daughter was recovered. But the comparison failed to contain the damage. The name was out, and it has dominated the narrative ever since. The Pima County Sheriff's Department was listening. Sheriff Chris Nanos did not let Banfield's report pass without an institutional response. On February 4th, mere hours after the episode aired, the department went on the offensive, releasing a formal statement to neutralize the allegation. The official stance was unambiguous. As of that moment, detectives had not designated any individual as a suspect or even a person of interest. The statement issued a sharp rebuke, labeling the dissemination of unverified claims as irresponsible and detrimental to the active search for the missing 84-year-old. 2 days later, on February 6th, Sheriff Nanos escalated his defense at a press briefing, stating explicitly, "We do not have anybody here listed as a suspect." Then came the nuance. While no one was a suspect, Nanos confirmed a critical detail. No one had been ruled out. He cautioned the media, warning that labeling a potential victim as a perpetrator was reckless. The sheriff wasn't just correcting the record, he was admonishing the messenger. He branded the reporting irresponsible, pushing back with a public, forceful denial designed to stop the rumor mill cold. Then, the narrative fractured. 10 days after insisting that nobody is eliminated, the sheriff's department executed a strategic pivot that baffled observers. On February 16th, Sheriff Nanos announced that the entire Guthrie family, including all siblings and their spouses, had been definitively cleared of any involvement. The department described the family as nothing but cooperative and gracious, reclassifying them strictly as victims in the tragedy. Nanos went further, stating that any suggestion of familial involvement was not only wrong, it is cruel. In under 2 weeks, the status shifted from open suspicion to total exoneration. This was not a progression, it was a reversal. The question became, what evidentiary breakthrough occurred in that 10-day window to justify such certainty? Publicly, no smoking gun was revealed. Critical forensic evidence, including DNA samples from the scene, was still pending analysis at a private laboratory in Florida. Sheriff Nanos himself admitted to NBC News that there had been a logistical delay, a snag at the independent lab processing the samples. A glove discovered 2 miles from the Guthrie home yielded DNA that did not match the family, but forensic experts noted this only cleared them of wearing that specific glove, not of the crime itself. The timeline reveals the anomaly. The family was cleared before the DNA results returned, before a suspect was named, and before an arrest was made. The sheriff has never explained the basis for this decision. Despite the sheriff's public condemnation, Banfield held her ground. There was no retraction. She offered no apology and no clarification. Instead, on February 12th, she appeared on Dan Abrams' Sirius XM show and reinforced her initial reporting. She told Abrams, I can confirm that my source has not wavered. Every single day since the report, they have stood by the information provided. She clarified that this was the prevailing theory within law enforcement as of February 2nd, the day after Nancy Guthrie was reported missing. She then listed her corroborating details. Annie Guthrie's car had been impounded for evidence, a fact later confirmed, and Banfield alleged that security cameras at the scene had been destroyed. Forensics reportedly recovered glass shards beneath the front lens. When the sheriff cleared the family on the 16th, Banfield's reaction was terse. Nothing has changed. She claimed her source described an atmosphere of paranoia inside the sheriff's department, with officials tightening information flow to plug the leak. The source alleged that internal personnel were now fearful of retaliation for speaking out. She quoted the source's warning directly. "When you are over the target, that is when you take the most flack." The Guthrie family, now squarely in the public crosshairs, began exploring defamation litigation. A source close to the family told columnist Rob Shooter, "You cannot float accusations like that and hide behind disclaimers." The report had dragged private citizens into a global media firestorm. Dan Abrams pressed her on the legal exposure, noting, "You have gotten a lot of heat, including suggestions of lawsuits. Have you heard from anyone directly?" He asked point blank if the threats had materialized into contact from the family's counsel. Banfield remained defiant. Facing potential litigation from one of the most powerful media families in America, she doubled down on her sourcing. She refused to rescind a single allegation. The stakes are absolute. Either she possesses the critical lead in a stalled investigation, or she is dismantling an innocent man's reputation for audience engagement. Banfield found allies. Megyn Kelly, the former Fox News and NBC anchor, validated the skepticism on her own SiriusXM program. Kelly speculated on the police tactics. "The reason they are returning to Annie and Tomaso's house repeatedly, I believe, is that they are probing for any connection." She expressed confusion over the investigative pattern. "I just do not understand why you would be interviewing the neighbors over and over unless you were building a specific timeline." Kelly reported that investigators were specifically hunting for digital evidence, potentially a burner phone at the couple's residence. She argued it would be investigative malpractice not to exhaustively vet the last people verified to have seen Nancy Guthrie alive. Jonathan Gilliam, a former FBI special agent, echoed this sentiment on Fox News the very day the clearance was announced. Gilliam cautioned that the sheriff's blanket clearance might be a reaction to public pressure rather than a conclusion based on forensic fact. He stated flatly, "Unless they have positive identification of who was in that house, they cannot forensically eliminate anyone." 3 experts, 3 platforms, 1 conclusion. Sheriff Chris Nanos moved immediately to shut it down, publicly condemning the speculation targeting the family as cruel and baseless. Yet the question dominating the headlines remains. Why has the son-in-law remained silent? It is a valid inquiry that demands a transparent response. Tomaso Chioni has not granted a single interview, issued a statement, or made a public appearance since Nancy Guthrie vanished. His wife, Annie, joined the family's emotional video plea 5 days into the investigation, while Savannah Guthrie has released dozens of updates to her millions of followers. In a heartbreaking update, Savannah marked the grim milestone. "It is now day 24 since our mother was taken from her bed in the dead of night." She described the passage of time as a relentless agony every hour, minute, and second, filled with the terror of the unknown and the crushing weight of her absence. "We are just missing her," she said, acknowledging the outpouring of support. "We know millions of you are praying people of every faith and no faith at all." The family has drawn strength from that collective vigil, urging the public to continue pleading for her return. "Please pray without ceasing," Savannah implored. "We still believe in a miracle. We still hold on to the belief that she can come home." It is a position of hope against hope, a desperate attempt to fan the dying embers of optimism as the weeks drag on. However, the family has also publicly acknowledged the darker possibility. Nancy may no longer be alive. They have accepted that she may have already passed on, reunited in death with her parents, her late husband, and her beloved brother, Pierce. "If that is the outcome, we will accept it," Savannah stated with resolve. But the need for closure is absolute. They need to locate her. They need to bring her home, regardless of the condition. To that end, the Guthries have announced a family-funded reward of up to $1 million for information leading to Nancy's recovery. Detailed instructions regarding the reward and the confidential reporting process have been distributed across all major social media platforms. The family emphasizes that the 1-800 tip line is fully anonymous. Someone, somewhere, holds the key to solving this mystery. Somebody knows, Savannah stressed. We are begging you, please, have the courage to come forward. In their grief, the Guthries have also recognized that they are not unique in their suffering. Countless other families endure this same agonizing limbo. In solidarity, they announced a $500,000 donation today to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The funds are designated to support the center's critical work, aiding families navigating trauma and funding active searches for the missing. As for Tomaso Chioni, has the last person to see Nancy alive spoken? No. Fairness dictates we examine the two distinct reasons for this strategy. The first explanation is strictly procedural. He is likely adhering to rigid legal counsel. Any defense attorney worth their retainer would instruct the last known contact in a disappearance case to maintain total public silence. Silence in this context is not an admission of guilt. It is simply evidence that the individual has retained competent legal representation. History warns against speaking. Scott Peterson's media blitz famously backfired. Defense lawyers know that innocent clients can easily destroy their own credibility under pressure. The second explanation is the one fueling internet sleuths. He has something to conceal. This theory has gained traction across social media. Critics highlight that while the rest of the Guthrie clan is pleading publicly, the man who drove Nancy home remains invisible. Scrutiny focuses on the 4-hour window between 9:48 p.m., when he dropped her off, and 1:47 a.m., when the security feed was cut. Investigators are also probing the 9-hour gap between her pacemaker losing signal at 2:28 a.m. and the welfare check at noon. The maddening reality of this investigation is that both theories, prudent silence and guilty concealment, fit the established facts perfectly. However, there is a third dimension to Chioni's silence that is largely being overlooked in the public discourse. He remains mute not just to the press, but while his wife's family endures a very public evisceration, and Savannah begs for help on network television. His silence persists even as his former bandmate, Dominic Evans, is forced to hide in his own home due to mob harassment. If Tomaso Chioni is innocent, his refusal to speak is allowing collateral damage to devastate people he presumably cares about. If he is guilty, however, maintaining this silence is arguably the most calculated tactical move he could make. The plausibility of both scenarios explains why, despite 23,000 tips, investigators have yet to secure a breakthrough. Suspicion remains fixed on an insider because the perpetrator demonstrated knowledge that a random opportunist would typically lack. The abductor seemingly knew the precise layout of the home's security infrastructure. A source close to the investigation told Times Radar Online *, whoever took her knew exactly where the lenses were pointing and smashed them before they could be recorded. Executing such a maneuver requires a chilling degree of premeditation and intimate knowledge of the property. The cameras, installed by the family specifically for Nancy's protection, were disabled as the intruder spent 41 minutes inside, moving with methodical calm. He located Nancy. He neutralized the surveillance. He extracted her. This was not the chaotic work of a stranger stumbling into a burglary. The timing was also specific. Arriving after 1:47 a.m., knowing she would be vulnerable, alone, and asleep. Such precision implies either extensive, undetected surveillance or inside information from someone intimately familiar with her daily routine. Investigators found no signs of a forced breach, no shattered glass, no splintered door frames, leaving them to determine how the intruder gained access without resistance. Federal agents suspect this was a calculated operation, citing evidence that the same suspect conducted surveillance at the residence on January 11th, 3 weeks prior to the abduction. Former FBI agent Jason Pack, in an interview with ABC News, stated, "If the surveillance subject and the kidnapper are indeed the same individual, it suggests the target was methodically cased," noting that such preparation points to a sophisticated level of criminal planning. The perpetrator possessed intimate knowledge of the home's layout, the victim's schedule, and the security blind spots, raising the critical question of how this intelligence was acquired. While the precision of the crime might suggest an inside job, forensic evidence collected at the scene largely contradicts the theory of family involvement. Laboratory analysis recovered DNA profiles from 2 unidentified males, neither of which matches the genetic markers of the immediate family. Furthermore, the recovered samples do not match Cyan Evans or any known associate, meaning a family conspirator would have required an accomplice completely unknown to law enforcement databases. Physical descriptors also fail to align. The FBI's suspect profile describes a male standing 5 feet 9 to 5 feet 10 inches with an average build. Independent investigators have confirmed that Chioni is significantly taller than the suspect on video, creating a substantial discrepancy that a disguise cannot explain. Security footage shows the suspect dressed in a ski mask and gloves, carrying a generic backpack purchased from a retail chain. Analysts argue that a family member, who is already a frequent visitor, would have no logical reason to wear a disguise designed to hide facial features from cameras they know exist. Sheriff Chris Nanos has publicly verified the family's total transparency, noting they have cooperated without hesitation since the initial report. The family voluntarily submitted their properties to searches, sat for extensive interviews, and surrendered personal vehicles for forensic processing. The financial demands issued by the kidnappers further undermine the theory of a family-orchestrated plot. Demanding $6 million in cryptocurrency via public channels represents a volatility and risk level that is inconsistent with an insider trying to cover their tracks. The January reconnaissance trip creates a logical paradox for the insider theory. A family member would not need to case a home they visit regularly. A son-in-law familiar with the property would have no need to conduct a separate, risky scouting mission to learn the layout. While public speculation continues, the investigation has inflicted severe collateral damage on Dominic Evans, a schoolteacher currently residing in Tucson. Evans's only connection is a musical partnership with Tomaso Chioni ending in 2007 and a single meeting with Nancy Guthrie at an Easter event in 2011. Following Ashleigh Banfield's broadcast, naming Chioni as a person of interest, online vigilantes tracked down Evans based on loose associations. These groups surfaced a 1999 misdemeanor burglary charge from his college years involving the theft of a watch and calculator, attempting to frame it as a pattern of behavior. Internet sleuths scrutinized his physical build against the masked suspect's silhouette, leading to crowds of harassers gathering outside his private residence. His wife, Andrea, described the siege to the New York Times, stating they were forced to hide in their bedroom with the lights extinguished after Evans endured 40 minutes of questioning. Law enforcement has not contacted him since that initial interview, and Sheriff Nanos has condemned the harassment, acknowledging that the couple is going through hell. Nanos suggested that Evans should retain legal counsel and pursue defamation suits against those spreading false accusations. A private citizen, whose link to the victim is a 15-year-old handshake, remains a prisoner in his own home as of today, February 28, 2026. As the month concludes, the FBI is reducing its on-site footprint in Tucson and transitioning the command center to Phoenix. Control of the Guthrie residence is being returned to the family, leaving only the primary detectives assigned to the case, while the reward now exceeds $1.3 million. The tip line remains open for anonymous information, and the cash reward is payable without identification. Over 23,000 tips have been logged. Despite processing nearly 50,000 leads across multiple agencies, officials have made 0 arrests, and critical DNA evidence remains pending at a private Florida laboratory. The investigation has hit a grim medical reality. Experts advise that without her daily medication, Nancy likely did not survive beyond the first 72 hours. Based on this timeline, investigators believe her remains are likely located within a 2 to 5 mile radius of the abduction site. Savannah Guthrie addressed the public this week, stating, "We still believe in a miracle, but we also know the reality that she may already be gone." Despite the lack of progress, media figures like Banfield and anticipated legal actions remain in a holding pattern, with no lawsuits filed as of this report. Sheriff Nanos has yet to provide a public explanation for the shift in investigative strategy observed between February 6th and February 16th. While certain journalists continue to label specific individuals as prime suspects, the sheriff is aware of the allegations and has formally cleared the family. Federal agents have privately characterized the sheriff's exoneration as premature, noting that the family has threatened legal action while the media refuses to retract. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old, relies on a pacemaker, requires daily medication, and has now been missing for 1 full month. Anyone with first-hand knowledge of her location is urged to contact the FBI immediately at 1-800-CALL-FBI or 1-800-255-324. Information can be submitted anonymously, and the $1.3 million reward is available for payout at a neutral location. The evidence has been presented. The public must now weigh the facts.